to you. Take 7 out of 35,000 verses and say that God spoke to them in ways in which told them to reject you. My family is an example of what it looks like when God speaks and you listen. It also is an example of what you do and what happens when carefully you tell your truth. You speak your truth. The closet is a dark, dark, sad place. And I know why we protect ourselves in it. But the closet of the church, with its queer music director, they have an amazing leader today. She's sitting right here, Judson, who founded the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Rights. God is everywhere. The divine is everywhere. And God is not a single personality. There are many who form that thing we call God. So pick one, speak to one, let them lead you from the earth to the sky, from the shadow that will be different at 5 than it is now. And yet, still at the end of the day, will be a palm tree because you are who you are. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Well, I think feedback. The sharing here is just so rich, but I want to also lift up the rainbow. And I think Sister Queen mentioned about how difficult it is to realize about the light coming through. But the fact is, and I was kind of quickly trying to find the specific statistic I wanted, I couldn't. But the beauty of the rainbow as an icon is, and this is for me, take what you like, leave the rest, is that the living water is refracted through some brokenness and it refracts into the colors. Now we can only see a few of them. The human eye can actually, the human eye actually is colorblind. okay, compared to some other God's creatures. But from the absence of light all the way to white, the brightest, there are millions. I think it was a number I hadn't known. Gazillion was what was shared. That is who we are. That every color of the rainbow, of living water refracting through some brokenness. And everybody has the brokenness. Okay? My brokenness may not be your brokenness, may not be Sister Queen's or Reverend Elizabeth's or Lavon's. But when light hits us, there is a rainbow coming through on the other side. So I think that there is also an opportunity for us to be open and realize that we don't have to get all dressed up and get prettied up and get ready for the light to hit us. Meaning we do not have to dispense with the brokenness to be ready to make the rainbow. The rainbow cannot be made but for our brokenness. So I invite you to live into it.
That was beautiful. Does anyone have any questions? Diane Russell.
Good afternoon and thanks for coming. Hi, Diane. Hi. I feel like we've been in a boxing ring for a while. And when I say for a while, this is just a preface to my question. In terms of civil rights. Recently, we had a trifecta of cases out of the Supreme Court. We talked about two of them, but let's talk about the recent one out of Maine, where the government has decided that it would fund religious education. And that taxpayer money goes towards religious education. I wanted to know how you feel about that, because clearly in the US, funding religious education might be different than funding spirituality. And what kind of messages are going to be sent going forward in terms of spirituality?
I jumped at that because I'm like.
Can you repeat the question for people who are streaming? Can you maybe summarize or repeat the question?
Absolutely. The last three cases of the Supreme Court address religious funding of public spaces, a women's right to body sovereignty, and the worthiness of guns versus humanity. Best way in which I can bring together what these last three cases. And by the way, I just need you to know there's 2 more days of the term. So Monday and Tuesday, we still have a couple of cases that can and will, come out. It's why I say the law is worth as much as the people who hold it are. If the law was that worthy, the 1964 Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, would be no longer necessary. Because we would have spent the money in education and other stuff that would mean that the crap we have to go through these days don't happen. This case in particular, Maine v. The Baptist Church that I is what brought this about. Governor King had decided that he was going to stop the voucher system. So I just wanted you to know some of the background behind it, because what it means now is that people who in Maine, particularly, and other states that don't want to pay taxes, get to use my money to indoctrinate their children. And I mean that literally, to indoctrinate their children. I preface that by the fact that I am the product of 17 teachers. I am the first person in my family, female in my family, who did not go to school to be a teacher. So public education, and all of them worked in the public system. Public education is very important to me. And the fact that we now are going to be forced to, regardless of what our particular spiritual practices, must be taught Christianity, because if you read the entire of the decision, this is a very Christian base. It's Christendom as we know it. It's incredibly problematic, and it goes to the fact that uh, you how do I say this? Um, you don't have to teach people, children, about difference. You don't have to tell them about the 1964 Act. You don't have to tell them about the EPA. You don't have to tell anything of any of those things that protect us and under which Title IX, women, all of those things. Because religious education doesn't mean they're not ascribed to standard curriculum. And it is, if you take a look historically to Germany and other countries, we always use Germany. I mean, they're pretty famous around how bad they did things. But it means that if you go to religious schools, there is still a discussion if schools that are non-Christian will receive the same treatment. So because it clearly states that it's against Sharia law, and Sharia law is if you go to a Muslim school, they're actually accusing you of teaching Sharia, and they need to actually move into Christianity. So it is a Christendom law, and one that is incredibly dangerous, and one that we sort of it's knocked out on us because we were too busy with dogs, and that is the place where we as activists fail children deeply. Yeah, I can say much more about it, but none of it for the interwebs at the moment.
I would just add about the task for activists is be courageous enough to reclaim your own biblical literacy. Because the underlying assumption of that particular case is that, quote, religion is coming through a prism of a particular vantage point and has not been met with, in my humble opinion, effective rebuttal that's exegetically sound. Because so many progressives have walked away from it or stayed trapped in church hurt or decided that this ain't for me or whatever. But just starting with the book of Bereshit, which is the first book in the Bible in Hebrew, God's pronouns are they, them, and theirs. Okay? That's not something new. That's something thousands of generations old. Okay? And if you keep coming through Lech Lecha and other parts of the Bible, Adonai's pronoun is she, her, hers. Okay? El's pronouns are he, him, his. So the diversity, just even from a gender identity standpoint, if we as humans deign to handcuff God, the story is on side, all right? And I'll take it all the way to Sodom and Gomorrah, because gay folk run from that scripture in particular. Yes, my sister here said there's only 7 verses that we can talk about. Well, first of all, if there's only 7, that can't be the totality of the story of the 66 books in the Protestant Bible anyway. But even if we were going to take it on, I invite people to go to the book of Ezekiel and find out what was the sin of Sodom. And the sin of Sodom was greed. So if we're going to get into it, let's get into it, but don't run from it. So I don't support the decision in particular, specifically as it relates to vouchers. I happen to come from a state called Iowa, and they're like right with Maine in terms of trying to do the education in that way. But that does not stop any of us from setting up charter schools that are open to spiritual education, that equip our children with enough biblical literacy to be able to say, oh, is this what you think? Well, let me share with you what the text says. But that's where we kind of stutter step and get on the back foot, because there's one vantage point put forward and there's no comeback. So I just leave it at that.
And before
It's not me. It's not me.
It's live on. It's
No,
live
no.
on.
That was my
That so I would say, one of the things that I would say here before I pass it to sister is that I have a hell of a lot easier time telling people that I'm gay, that I'm letting people know that I'm a religious person, as somebody who is a practicing lesbian. And I try to practice every day. But the reality is that because people will hurt people, and we run away from religion because we think religion is but an excuse for people's insecurity, as we've all mentioned in one way, shape, or another, when taken the wrong way.
Because we have a certain time limitation, I'm gonna do my best to put it concisely. So for how I was raised, how I was ordained, which there's a lot that happened in between that time. The Bible is one of the scriptural texts, and we have some scriptural texts that are still engraved 6 to 8 inches deep in stone in different parts of the world, not only Africa, but throughout the Americas, throughout Polynesian islands, throughout Eurasia. And a lot of times we tend to, when we're speaking of religious education and things here in America, and I want to make sure this comes across clear so that since I'm being videotaped and quoted, I want to make sure I say it as clean as possible. America has stepped off its throne of being balanced. I'm going to say it again. America has stepped off its throne of being balanced. So to even introduce any type of law around quote unquote religious education, and you haven't handled your regular education well yet, that's a problem to me. If we were, and I'm in this context, I'm speaking from actually being one of the founders of the Virgin Islands Natural Educators Homeschooling Association back in the 90s. And that was one of the main reasons we did that, because we had families that had various religious practices, whether they were Jewish, whether they were African Hebrew Israelite, whether they were Muslim or different denominations of Christianity, whether they were Ifa traditional practitioners, whether they were practitioners of Smaitawi or other different spiritual systems, and there was no protection for them to be able to homeschool or unschool and engage their children, right? And that's right here in the VI. And I must say that the Virgin Islands government, with all of its flaws and its perfections, notice I said both, right? I knew you thought I was going to say flaws and imperfections. Ha! But no, I want to highlight that in that regard, they listened to what the parents shared. And we didn't have to go into a legal battle per se. So we have so many other issues going on in the country that this might be important to those families in Maine. And I got that. And it obviously must be so important to them that the money they're putting into this legal action that could have just been put into teaching their children, they chose to make this something go this far. I do not think it's advantageous for most families because, again, if we're dealing with only one religious practice being focused upon, then what's going to happen to all of those other families that have different, again, we're having the same discussion. We talked about our differences, highlighting our similarities, reflecting on light. We're saying all these things, but we're talking about a potential change in law that will be discriminatory, that will be sexist. Let's get straight. And it's going to be outright another form of hatred. You see where I'm going? That's going to be permeated and then financed by the federal government. That's not so much a problem to me, but I think it should make us reflect on our shared humanity. Is this being supported for our shared humanity in this country that many people carry the blue passport? Even if in this space called the Virgin Islands, that blue passport can be, say it nicely, can be marginalized. just in regard of being part of the citizenry of the United States of America, which quite recently has been questioned, right? For persons here in the Virgin Islands, persons in American Samoa, persons in Mariana Islands, persons in Guam, and even Puerto Rico, right? And I say that because there's another side of how those of us that are part of this, and I'm cautious when I say clergy. People remember clergy, people remember titles like reverend and minister. If I start saying Nisut Moot, you're like, what did you say, Dr. Jack? But we just say Nisut Moot when we're speaking of women that are responsible as priestesses in a particular order. And how it sort of translates into English is sister queen. And we don't mean queen like you up here and you do the Barbie doll thing and you spin, right? Even though I like to dress up because I don't get to wear my clothes anywhere. But I'm just saying, that's what happens. You have stuff in your closet you don't get to. So wow, I'm gonna be in a panel. So of course you're gonna wear. But it's not about the dress up part. It's about how we live. And if we have to keep going into this Supreme Court zone where we know the Supreme Court has exemplified its conservatism to the highest on Friday. And it's going to continue to do that. And the intention is to agitate. It's going to do two things. Either people are just going to lay over and just lay down, or people going to fight. And prayerfully, whatever fight we do it strategically so that we win. And that we win without bloodshed. And I'm going to say that again, because there's enough bloodshed already. That's the other thing that's what I see when I see these types of pending laws coming forward. I'm looking at the bloodshed part of how people are going to respond or not if they don't get what they think they need, when in actuality it's only a want. It's not what they need, right? And I'm hoping that through these types of engagements that are coming through these types of fora, that we can open up that type of conversation. And it's interesting because I always say St. Croix is at the center of everything, literally. There aren't too many communities in the Caribbean that will have this type of an open discourse, period. I could say that. And I've spent a lot of time in other Caribbean islands, growing up on several nearby, yeah? And I'm just hoping that whatever they're doing, I hope they catch themselves, because they need to catch themselves. Say it in standard English. It would be ideal for American governance, all three branches, to navigate what shared humanity is again, and to go back to 1776 and what they said that they were going to do, even in the midst of destroying and dismantling. Like now you can clean it up. So when I say that they have come off their throne, because that's how people see America. They're here, they're on a throne, they think, right? So I'm just saying, don't fall off. Navigate so that we can do something right for a change. Do something humane for a change. Do something that is not exploiting people and making taxpayers flip out, right? Because that's what's going to, did I say that in standard English? Yes, I say that with grace. Give thanks.
So this has been amazing, and we are running out of time for this segment, but would you like to say something else, Reverend Elizabeth?
Always remember that though Christendom took us here, they were not alone. People ask me where I'm from, and I'm always very proud to say I'm from Puerto Rico. We, the Caribbean, are the ultimate example of a colonial experiment. The Lesser Antilles, or the islands, the West Indies, we are the place where our Black ancestors got broken. They came as scholars, as well-known people. They knew math. They knew geometry. Who the hell did you think navigated those boats? They were Jewish scholars, because who do you think staffed the boats? because they were running away from the Inquisition. And they were Christians. Italians at that. We blame the Spaniard, but they pay for it in reality. Columbus was Italian. Couldn't get anything in Italy, so he went to Spain and there to get some money, and here we are. What that means is, together with the original spirituality of our people, the Arawak nations, and its all compositions, we are amalgamation, una sopa, a really good stew of all that we are, formal and informal. Don't ever let anybody tell you that just because you don't use the words God or religion, that you are not a child of the divine. Ever. Because you are. Look at one another and understand that. Start from a point of commonality, not of difference. And when we get there, it won't be easy and there will be fights, but there will be no bloodshed. We'll try as much as we can not to be violent. But sometimes it happens. And don't ever give them people in that throne the name of an entire continent. United Stadians believe they own a continent. It's a made-up term. I just wanted to say it. It's a little translation of estadounidense it's from the Spanish, but I call them United Stadians. And everybody goes, what? I'm like, yeah, that's your country. You're the only ones who don't seem to have a gerundio. So guess what? I'm giving you one. You have a country in I, as a Puerto Rican, was given citizenship so that you could sit your lily ass white ass at home, and my people in the Borinqueniers went to war, just like the people of the West Indies here did. So, we are children of the divine. We fight a peaceful war, but a war nonetheless. And guess what? With the divine and one another, we will win, and our full humanity will for always be recognized. Ashe.
The only thing I would add after this amazing panel, thank you, Levon, for assembling us together, is start from a point of commonality, but recognize that the real starting point is love. And I invite you to love yourselves first. And then from that place of love, you can love anyone who comes to you. And from that point is where the battle ultimately will be fought and won on the terrain of love.
Thank you, Reverend Julie. Thank you, Reverend.
See, you even have a hard time calling me Reverend.
I'm trying not to cry, and I'm laughing at that. So much joy in my heart right now. Thank you, Reverend Elizabeth Melendez Rivera, and thank you, Dr. Chinzira Kahina. Any questions, because we have to move on, but we will take more questions because hasn't this been amazing? Thank you. You're welcome. These are my goddess. I'm so privileged to know you all, and I'm so grateful that you came to St. Croix to be here for our communities. Thank you. Reverend Julie Johnson Staples, Reverend Elizabeth Melendez Rivera, and Dr. Chinzira Kahina. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen. We're just gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we're gonna go to the local and regional organizations portion. 1 second.
To remember that, or remind us to remember that culture heals humanity, land is our foundation, and spiritual harmony unifies us. Did you check that out? Again, culture, we can say it together though. Culture heals humanity, land is our foundation, and spiritual harmony unifies us. All righty, Ashe.
Ashe, thank you. We're going to take 5 minutes and then we're going to come back with the local and regional organizations. VI Care, Dr. George Flores, St. Croix Pride, Amani Evans, and One Love Incorporated with Bobby Thompson, and Waves Ahead with Dr. Wilfred Leviosa. Thank you.
You good? I wish there was a way to, I wish there was a way to pause. I wonder if it's possible.
co-founder Bobby Thompson. So start with you, Dr. Labiosa. Would you please give us an origin story and where you are today with your organization in Puerto Rico, please?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. It's great to come back to St. Croix. I have now adopted St. Croix as my other home. I come often here because I just have become part of this museum, of the Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts, since my involvement after the Hurricane Irma and Maria. And I was introduced to this wonderful people here at the CMC Arts. And they have adopted me, and I have adopted them, and now it's a family of joy and art. And so I am Puerto Rican. I'm Wilfred Labiosa, and I grew up in Puerto Rico, and then I moved to Massachusetts to study, and I lived there for over 27 years. I fell in love with Massachusetts not only because of its academic world, but also because there were so many idiosyncrasies of Massachusetts. There was a lot of racism, sexism, classism, you name it, they're alive and well in Massachusetts. But at the same time, they also embraced the diversity that was moving to Massachusetts. And I had the pleasure of becoming part of Boston Pride, and I planned Boston Pride for more than 20 years of my 27 years there, and that was a lot of hiccups in Boston. But at least I was able to bring together the Latino LGBT community in Massachusetts. Give or take, every year I used to fly to Puerto Rico 3, 4, 5 times a year to visit my family. And in 2014, I decided to move to Puerto Rico because my mom became very ill. And when I divorced, I quit my job. It was very quick. And I moved back home. But when I moved back home, and I moved back home because of my family to take care of them, I saw that where was I going to become old? Was there anything for me as a gay Latino Puerto Rican man coming back to my homeland? The answer was no. So I said, well, Wilfred, you have done so much in Boston. Puerto Rico, go at it. Go at it and move to Puerto Rico and work in Puerto Rico. So I decided to form Waves Ahead. Waves Ahead is the only organization that works with and focuses on the LGBT elders. And when I developed the organization, it was focusing on the mental health of our elders, 50 plus. And why 50? Elders supposed to be 65 and older. Well, LGBT community around the world doesn't get the same preventive care that heterosexuals do get. And hence, we as a community, as a whole, and more as Latino LGBT community, we suffer from more diseases at an earlier age than the heterosexual counterparts because of the lack of access to health. This, and that's where the disparities come about. So I decided to focus Waves Ahead on mental health. But the issue with that was that there were so many other situations that were occurring in Puerto Rico at that time. It took me a few years to organize as an organization, as a nonprofit organization. And in 2017, we opened our doors thanks to the goodness and the understanding of the mayor of San Juan at the time, Carmen Yulín Cruz. Carmen Yulín Cruz is a lady that educated herself also in the same institution that I was at BU, Boston University. And thanks to her, I decided to request a meeting with her. And I said, look, I'm opening Waves Ahead. It's the only organization that will take care of our LGBT elders that no one else wants. And please give me a space so I can do what I know how to do. And she did give us a space. At the time was in Carnegie Library. It's a beautiful building in Old San Juan. I always requested it from her. Please, before you stop being mayor, please sign it off to me. She said, no, well, it's a historical building, so I cannot. And I'm like, darn. But she did give me a building. She did give me some land to develop the first community center in Puerto Rico in 2019, believe it or not. 2019. So after over 20 years of a parade in San Juan, which that's a whole different discussion, finally we had a community center in San Juan, but the elders were coming to me and the youth, the young LGBT people were coming to me saying, we need also a space. And I said, sure, why not? Let's make it open to all. And we have become the centro de todes. Todes is a word that is very gender specific, but todes with E instead of A or E, um, with an O or A, it becomes gender neutral and non-gender specific, so non-binary, and that's what we call it, centro de todes. So Waves Ahead has decided, and we have decided, and I have to admit, thank you so much to Lisbeth Melendez, who's around, she was just at the panel, and I don't know where she went. Oh, she's over there. Hi. Um, she led the efforts in the United States for us to be able to rebuild homes in Puerto Rico that were destroyed. And people from the diaspora, gay, straight, and Puerto Rican, and LGBT, started to outreach to us. And that's how Reverend Julie became connected with Waves Ahead and our work. And then Reverend Julie was the one who said, let's take a trip to St. Croix and try to help the people over there. And that's how me and Waves Ahead started to become involved here in St. Croix. But we decided that we needed to also bring our message of inclusion and diversity to the rest part of the island of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is 100 miles by 35. In 2 hours, you get to one side, and in 2 hours, you get to the other side. Easy as that. But if you go through the mountain range, it will take you more longer because the roads are gone since the hurricane. But so I decided to open different community centers across the island to give access to the LGBT elders and LGBT community to have a center that they can call their home. And that's how we have been able to address the current situation in Puerto Rico by opening 3 other centers: San Juan, Cabo Rojo, which is in the southwest part of the island, Maunabo, which is in the southeast, and now I have signed to a coalition with the Ricky Martin Foundation to open our 4th community center in Loíza, which is in the northeast side of the island. So we have been able to open 4 community centers, and now the city, and I'll mention very briefly that every time I go to a mayor to request a meeting, I am giving the meeting, but very rarely are the mayors of each town understanding the diversity that lives in their district. So it's not until I tell them the votes that are in their district, they understand me because of the votes. And because we are stronger, united, they understand that piece. And in Cabo Rojo is the largest gay pride parade, I want to say, outside of Cuba, all the way through the islands. In Boquerón, they bring together from 10 to 15,000 people go to Boquerón over a weekend to celebrate Pride. And that marks an economical difference. And so they have to listen. So the new mayor of Cabo Rojo, well, not new anymore, 2 years in the making now, he listened to my plea about developing a shelter for LGBT elders, LGBT community, and domestic violence survivors. So now we're in the midst of developing and remodeling a space to become and open the first shelter of its kind in Puerto Rico that is called Soraya's Shelter. Soraya was the first transgender lady in Puerto Rico that legally changed not only what she knew that she was, a lady that she was, Puerto Rican lady that she was, but she also was the first transgender woman to run for public office. She lost, but she made the mark. And she was the first woman to do a case with the INS for immigration to bring her fiance from the Dominican Republic legally to the Puerto Rico and won that case at the federal court level. So, and she was my treasurer, and she believed in my dream to bring Waves Ahead to Puerto Rico. I always become emotional because Soraya died during the pandemic, and so she was not able to see the shelter to fruition. But I know she's always with me in the energy. But in Puerto Rico, besides this, and you can, we have about 3.2 million inhabitants in Puerto Rico. if you do statistics from 7 to 11% are LGBT people. We are growing older. And so most of the individuals, and it's stipulated by 2025, older adults, 55 and older, will be over 53% of the population in Puerto Rico. And by 2030, it would be over 60% of the population in Puerto Rico. That's not too far. That's not too far. Not in the future. That's just coming around the corner. So we are battling a lot of issues in Puerto Rico because we're growing older. Also, hate crimes are going against my brothers and sisters from the transgender community. We have had over 22 hate crimes, not written as hate crimes. Most of them have been, about 16 of them. But the rest is of people that we know that have died because of being LGBT community. Also, suicide attempts and death by suicide is very different in the States. We are an older population, and hence over 40% to 60% of death by suicide and suicide attempts are in the older population, 45 years of age and older, not the young. So it is very different dynamics that are playing out in Puerto Rico. We did a study last year because as in St. Croix, there is a lack of data about LGBT community. And so we have made a commitment with Jon Snow Inc. to do research studies on our population every year. So we pick a different topic. So in 2020, we picked about the need for housing for LGBT community. In 2021, we did the HIV, older adults living with HIV, and had a needs assessment done. And this year, we just began a few weeks ago, the mental health status of our LGBT community, older adults. And so, and in our studies, we have found that 1 out of every 5 individuals doesn't know what they're going to eat that night. 1 in every 5. 3 out of every 10, they don't have any permanent housing or any housing roof that they can call their own. So these are issues that are impacting not only the LGBT community, but we're talking about the LGBT community. Can you imagine the elders? Can you imagine the larger population in Puerto Rico? We have had a lot of issues with our government. From running away with money, from
Welcome to the team.
to many issues. But it is important to understand that from those issues that have occurred in Puerto Rico and that are still occurring, we're learning a lot from it, and we're using it to empower our community with the information required. We, at Ways Ahead, we began a leadership academy and an advocacy program called Empoderate, Empower Yourself, which Lavon came to participate in our second academy in Puerto Rico. And we found so much energy and so much strength in bringing together small groups of people from around the island. Our first academy was during the pandemic, in October of 2021. And then this one was in March, and now we're going to come with another academy this fall. But we found that bringing together people like yourselves together to have a conversation and to learn from each other about our intersectionalities, we can make a difference. And we did. A few days ago, this past week, we were able to work with the Senate in Puerto Rico on the law that it is 427 in Puerto Rico that will make funds coming to the island, at least 18% of every single federal funding, go directly to develop housing for LGBT elders. The governor has stated that he will sign it into law, and I will be in La Fortaleza next week to make sure that he signs it into law. And right now we're working with the rest of the Senate and the House in Puerto Rico to pass a Bill of Rights for LGBT people. I know Lavon and Lisbeth have had the pleasure to meet our first Afro-Boricua lesbian to run for Senate and win in Puerto Rico, Senadora Ana Irma Rivera Lacena. And I mentioned her name because her name needs to be mentioned, because she is a powerful woman and she will go far. And thanks to her is that we have been able to bring our voices to the Senate finally after so many years of struggle. And so she has a big battle, but it is not an impossible battle. And I know that with the help of allies and members of the LGBT community, we will be continuing to organize and be able to demand our space at the table. I always say something very cute, but it has a strong meaning. I always ask for the bag of M&Ms, and I don't get my bag of M&Ms. I only get a few pieces. But with those few pieces, you can add to that bag of M&Ms. And so I will continue my battle thanks to allies like Lavon here at the St. Croix, and to people who have always supported my crazy dreams of developing an organization in Puerto Rico for LGBT elders and LGBT community, like Reverend Julie Johnson and her crew from her past work, and Lisbeth that always has a piece of my heart, and she knows it. We can make it happen, and we will make it happen, and we will continue. There will be blood spilled. There will be a lot of suffering, but at the end of all that, we will be able to come together with love and our hopes and dreams, because hope is alive in Puerto Rico for our community. So later on, I will pass a piece that is very short, that is in the birth of it. We were just selected by the Metropolitan Museum of Art to show about the LGBT movement in Puerto Rico. And so they have only given us a minute to show all of our struggles. So we're working on that piece, but it will be for next year to celebrate the 20 years of fights and struggles of the LGBT community in Puerto Rico. So later on, I'll show you the piece upstairs for those who join us to show the other piece that we're showing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Levy. Next, I have the honor and privilege to introduce you to my friend, my brother, the founder of VI Care, Dr. Reverend George Flores Jr. Could you give us an origin story of VI Care, please?
Can you hear me?
Turn on my.
Oh, wait. Oh, push this button. Oh, I said, okay, got it. This was a surprise for me because I came home really to recuperate, and then Lavon asked me to. VI Care was one of the most creative and helpful thing I have ever done in my life. Before that, I love to live. I enjoy living. I live here in St. Croix and St. Damas, Puerto Rico, but I knew I loved the world. So I did a lot of traveling and stuff. And I was literally on a trip, a 2-month trip in Europe by myself when my grandmother died. And this is kind of important because my grandmother raised me. So I was going to stay because I was in the middle of my 2-month trip. And then I decided, no. So at the last minute, I managed to get to Vieques, Puerto Rico, just before she got buried. After that, it was like, okay, now I want to go back to do my trip. And I thought I'm do that. I said, well, let me go to St. Croix first and go visit family. While I was here, a friend introduced me to Jerry Kinky. Okay, we became brothers. And he was interested in doing a hospice for people that are HIV. I had just been diagnosed just before going to my trip to Europe, AIDS diagnosed. So I was like, you know what? You do need to have a hospice here. So him and I, we met at the Burger King that used to be over here, remember? And we chit-chatted. And then from there, somehow we just kept talking about doing this. And then we got together with Jill and Bobby. I don't remember last names. I'm not good at that. I'm not even trying. So, and then we would have all these meetings, and we started and came up with VI Care. And it was really what we realized was that St. Croix and the other Caribbean islands, especially the Virgin Islands, needed to be educated because there was no educational system. And I'm a firm believer, and I saw this with my family, that if I educate them about my situation, then it was easier for me to be around them. So we decided let's start doing this with VI Care. And one day, we're in a meeting, and it was all logistics. I hate logistics, I really do. And we're sitting there, and it was like, why aren't we set up? and someone said, "Oh, we're waiting for some," and I'm gonna say exactly what. So some crazy bitch, excuse the word, that we need to talk to her, and she's like, blah, blah, blah. I go like, so you're telling me you are afraid to go talk to this woman who's gonna offer us a free building? I said I will go talk to her. Now you understand. Before this, I'm very independent, very self-sufficient. I really never ask people to do things. And I said, "You sure you want to do this?" I said, "Yes." So I went over that same afternoon, spoke to her. She gave me the key, and we have an office downtown that she said it's yours, rent free, and everything. And from there, now I'm like, okay, now what? What am I gonna do now? Before that, I knew I did a lot of different things, and I said, well, just reflect on what you have done in your life. And so we had to set up the office, we had to set up fundraising, we had to set up simple things as friggin' stationery, and all these different things. And little by little, I started doing that. And the beauty of that is all these people that know me here became my family in the midst of that, because the the gay community in the Virgin Islands really are the story of VI Care, because they all got together. So it wasn't yes, I started it with 4 other people, but it got done because of everybody else. And with the help of everyone, we got the office going, we got fundraising going, we got the AIDS walk. And what I did is to do all of those things. I reflected on, like I did quite a few AIDS walk in New York City, and I remember I had did a hunger fundraising thing in college, and you had to do a walk. So I would look back on all the things that I did, and all the administrative stuff that I did, and things that I did as a flight attendant, because you have to expedite things when you're a flight attendant. And I put it all together, and it's not so arrogant to my part, but I kind of like what we came up with and what we did. But it was possible because everyone was there to help me with all the simple logistic things. And at the same time, one of the main reasons I came home was because I was told that I had AIDS, so therefore I only had a few days, few months to live. And so I came here to die, literally. And in the midst of all of that, a very good friend, and this is really the catalyst that made VI Care become possible. He was in the hospital with pneumonia, and he had been diagnosed. And I went to visit him. He was very close friends to my baby sister. And when I was sitting with him, I said, we could beat this. But he said to me was, no. He says, I don't think I could live in St. Croix with people knowing I have AIDS. I'd rather die. I went like, what? You crazy? In my mind, I didn't say that to him. I said, but you know what? I respect where you're at. And if that's what you believe, then yes, but that's not what I would do. He literally died that night. And I was so angry that a community can cause such a brilliant young man to wish to die versus live because of him being scorned by them. I said, this shit ain't happening again. Not on my watch, not while I'm alive. And that's when I decided, and again, might sound arrogant on my part when I said VI Care will become possible, because this ain't happening to nobody. And I became an advocate for, whereas before I could care less. I just lived my life. I went to New York to be wild and crazy, and I did. I went there during drug, sex, and rock and roll. I did it all and then some, okay?
Amazing.
And it wasn't until this happened that I realized there was another part of me that existed, because I thought life was just about live. And what one of the beautiful things that came out of VI Care was that it normalized HIV for me, which used to be had such a negative connotation, because I had to live with it on a day-to-day basis. I went to different schools and different places to educate everyone. And I became part of, would have to go to CDC meetings and all that stuff. So it normalized being AIDS diagnosed for me. And I really believe I am the last of all of my friends and many after that's been alive. I am 33 years now, HIV diagnosis. And VI Care and these wonderful people that are here, Lavon being one of them, are the reason I'm alive. And so that's really VI Care was, in a sense, kind of like the catalyst that made me live. And I'm happy that I was part of that, you know. And it taught me about a different. It taught me the art of giving because before VI Care, I would never beg for everything. Since I was 11, I was always self-sufficient. I learned to beg, okay? I learned to beg like nobody would beg. I want this, I need this, please can I have it? Okay? Because that's how we have, because we had nothing. We started with nothing. So, and that is another thing that has helped me also make it through my personal medical issues. So, VI Care for me was and is a blessing. And thank you all for letting me share that. Any
Thank you, George. Now I have the honor and privilege of introducing you to Imani Evans from St. Croix Pride.
Good afternoon. So my name is Imani Evans. I am a member of St. Croix Pride. I am also a co-founder of a little club at the Good Old Country Day School called Prism Q&A, which I'll explain some stuff about. So as far as St. Croix Pride goes, I have only been a member for, I think, the past 5 years. I started off as a senior in high school. I was at the Good Old Country Day School, and we were kind of having some struggles with some issues coming up with queer students and the treatment of queer students at the school, including something that happened to one of my best friends. And we turned around and decided this time we gotta start something, we gotta come together, organize, and figure out what we're gonna do. So we started Prism Q&A, which was a really lovely time for us. And at some point, a co-founder of Prism Q&A sent me something on Facebook and was like, hey, there's this group St. Croix called St. Croix Pride, and they're posting events and they just put out a calendar. Like, we should talk to them, see what's up. I think a few weeks after we were reached out to by a member of St. Croix Pride called Coral McGahee. I think you guys probably know her. And it's just casual conversation, inviting us to a meeting. And we started that relationship, and then, we didn't have to do much. And I want to say it was January or February of 2017, right after the hurricanes. Something went up on the page, and I saw a list of events, and I didn't see a parade anywhere. And we had just talked about how badly we wish we could just throw a parade at the school and get all the queer students to walk around and, just finally feel like we're really a part of something. And I decided to send a message to the Facebook page asking, hey, when is the parade happening? And I got a message back the next day, and they were like, well, if you want to plan it, we'll come ahead. And that's exactly what we did. And I mean, the rest is history. If you were here on St. Croix at that time, it was nothing easy. Yeah, we had a really good time. The radio stuff, the newspaper stuff, the Facebook conversations, it seemed like for weeks we couldn't do anything but just watch and wait as we heard more and more from people's opinions of the Pride Parade. And during all of that, there was already kind of a calendar of events that St. Croix Pride was used to putting on, including some brunches, movie nights. We also like this one. And then it got to that point. And anybody who was, part of the organization process knows that we had many late nights, phone calls. Ms. Wise was there, and we, really had to take our time and be really careful, not only with ourselves but with our community, trying to do something that was going to be the first of its kind in the territory, and trying to do something that really was already coming with so much pushback before we even really got on the road. And we were shaken, just absolutely terrified and so excited, and we made it happen. We had Holland Redfield, the late Senator Holland Redfield, rest his soul, who was Grand Marshal of the parade and stood at the front carrying a banner with our president, Mr. Bob Palmatier. We had Delegate Stacey Plaskett showed up. Before he was elected, Brian Roach had a team, and they came out in just numbers. Carmen Yulín Cruz, who I was so excited to hear her name, sent out a tweet of some pictures from the parade, and I fangirled all the way through that. And we ended up having a time of our lives. I think we had 200 participants, which was, lovely for us because we were terrified nobody would make it, maybe 20 protesters. And it really set off something, I think, for all of us. We finally realized that, for a while we had been kind of undercover and queer. And finally we were able to really say, all right, we here and we loud and we outside and you're going to watch because you don't really have a choice at this point. And since then, the truck has never stopped. We had a good time. People like Waves Ahead has been really cool to work with. I think we started working with you guys maybe in 2019, 2020, when you started doing the housing count. I remember that. We have worked with the museum for a while, doing Pride Through Art, usually involving, the GOYs, Jean Rotter has been a big help, and also collaborating with other really important organizations in the territory, such as Liberty Place. I see you, Miss Indira. One Love, obviously, who comes out of EBI, and, a few other movers and shakers who've just been really important for us. And today, St. Croix Pride is really continuing to lean into the collaborative effort of the queer community in the VI. I think we all realize that we hold each other up. We really stand and hold hands in everything when it comes to supporting the queer community, celebrating the queer community, educating the queer community. And it has just been such a fun time for us to really sit down, especially this year. And, after the past few years that we had, not really being sure about what things were going to look like and really missing each other and missing the ability to come together and celebrate each other. And somehow, with the help of multiple organizations and one of my partners in crime, Mr. Bobby Thompson, I think we had about 8 weeks, and CMCA was huge help in it, and we pulled together this past Pride Month. We're so excited to be here at the end of it, and also sad too because we'd love to just walk this all the way through the summer and pretend that it's our party. We are just really excited to be able to continue to bring these experiences to the VI, continue to support queer people and their allies in the Virgin Islands, and to continue to create space and kind of push the boundaries of the ways that we're able to do that. Because right now, I think we have a lot of potential, we have a lot of plans, we have all of the right people in all of the right places. And it's really just a matter of saying, now that we're able to wake up from the pandemic nap, how do we put some gas in the tank? How do we keep driving this? How do we make sure that we're able to continue reaching different heights, creating, more spaces, pushing the barriers that we have so long been held back by. So yeah, St. Croix Pride is, I was excited to be here. I was excited to be doing this, and just really excited to continue moving this one.
Thank you, Imani. Well said. And bring it, girl. Art is the story of us, so we can definitely continue to create more space and more opportunities. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure and privilege to introduce you to Bobby Thompson, one of the founders of One Love Incorporated. Would you please tell us the origin story of One Love, Bobby?
Sure. So I'll start off by just talking about what One Love is. We are a pro-LGBTQIA plus organization for Virgin Islanders and for everyone who enjoys the culture and land that we have. So our goals are to develop and provide educational, recreational, cultural, economic, social, and vocational programs and opportunities to all persons. We want to promote the cultural sensitivity and for LGBTI Virgin Islanders, and also to be inclusive of allies. and we want to provide community. And so those are our goals. Those are our visions. A lot of times, we probably feel that we fall short, but I think that we also have accomplished a lot. Like Amani was just saying, like when we really put our force into it, we make great changes. Like this Pride Month um, has been a phenomenal example of what of the progress that we have made as a community. And I didn't answer your question. So before I get too far to that, let me go into the history of One Love. So One Love started in 2015. It was founded by Michael Rosario. He was in a class and was experiencing some anti-LGBT remarks, and he received support from neither his teacher, his professor, or from other faculty members. And so he realized that there needed to be something to be done to support LGBT students at the university. And so he created the group One Love, and then with him, we were co-founders. Jamili Edwards, who is not here right now, but who was the current president of One Love. And we tried to make an inclusive space for people at UVI. We started with events like a coming out day, a walk for silence, a National Day of Silence walk, and it was very. I mean, every step that we take is almost like fear is always there, but it was really cool to see. The people who came out to support the professors and the students who were part of, especially, for instance, the National Day of Silence walk, because it helped to show how much support we had maybe hidden in the community. Because I guess the same way in that many people, LGBT people, have to come out, we are hidden. Allies and support is also hidden. Like people are not vocal about the support for LGBT people, and so I think that we're both unveiling ourselves and the support and the love that we have within our community. So since 2015, we've traveled to various conferences and spoke on different panel discussions. That was including the 2016 Caribbean Women's and Sexual Diversity Conference by ECADE. And that stands for Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality. We have spoken at the 2019 Caribbean Women's Conference as well. In 2019, we went to New York to talk about the first Pride Parade with Mani Evans and, of course, with Jams Edwards. And that was in the In My Mind conference. It was a conference on mental health and LGBT communities. And so in 2021, December, we got our 501c3 status. And we're continuing to work to provide education and community for the Virgin Islands, for LGBTQIA Virgin Islanders. But that's, of course, through a lot of collaboration and support from the community with organizations like St. Croix Pride, with ARCH, Access to Racial Cultural Health Institute, CMCA, Liberty Place, and then, of course, I think it's unfortunate. So let me say that one of our big supporters, or one of the big supporters that we have for LGBT communities, is our HIV care and HIV prevention organizations. And I think that's because we are so disproportionately affected by HIV that, of course, the people who are affected are the people who come together to make a change. And there's a great amount of funding that comes with that. And so just as myself, I am also a prevention coordinator for Department of Health. It is also with Department of Health and with organizations like Frederick Healthcare, which just put on a phenomenal fair for the community, and was one of the biggest allies that I've seen in this in the pushing forward this year's Pride Parade. We are able to move the community forward. So and I was going in all sorts of directions. I hope we got a little piece of what I was trying to say. But thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here to represent One Love.
I just wanted to share this story because to me, it tells me what St. Croix is. In the midst of while I was doing the VIK and all of that, I was invited to do one of the talk shows that my cousin used to have on Channel 12. And it was up in Gallows Bay. We had to go in, and I sat there with her and her co-host. And the commitment I made to her was they could ask me any question about my sexuality. I was going to be open-minded, unless it was a little too personal, which for me there isn't much like, and anything they wanted to know about HIV and stuff. So we had this long 1 hour session, and it went very well. There were also like calls that came in. Now I had to drive because I live all the way in Frederickson, the only place to live. And so I drove all the way from Christiansted coming down, and I'm thinking, driving down by myself, I said, oh shucks. I went and I talked about my being gay and about HIV and all this stuff. Am I going to be safe? And I really felt this sort of like concern that somebody might try to hurt me. So now the next day I get up, I made it home, and I was driving up to Christiansted, and there was a gas station when you come out of St. Croix by the sea, and right on the road, and I had to stop for gas. So I go in there and I stop to pull in to get gas. And I was on the last of the islands, and all of a sudden I get out of my car and I see these three men coming at me, and I go, oh shit, shots. Sorry, shots. And I'm like, now they're gonna attack me. And to my surprise, which showed me the truth about us Crucians, those three men all came and they put out their hand to me, and they shook my hand, and they were all straight men that I know of. And they said to me, thank you for having the courage and taking the time to do what needed to be done. And to me, that is how I see us Crucians. We are really very open-minded people. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, George. I always say feel the fear and do it anyway. Does anyone have any questions for anybody on the panel?
I have a question. So I think that a lot of times we don't talk about the socioeconomic differences in your existence as queer people. As like a local Virgin Islander, a queer female, and femme presenting, my existence in our community is very different than more of a flamboyant gay male, black male, or someone who's existing on a lower poverty level. I think a lot of times that conversation is missed because my safety and my well-being is never really a threat. Most of the time, because I walk in, I'm not gay what would consider gay presenting unless I go in the college.
Yes. What was the question?
So the question is like, what would you say your experience was or has been functioning in different realms of what it means to be queer or gay?
I have had no issues. I don't know if it's because I am who I am, and actually being raised in Frederickson in particular, my nickname used to be Punky George. Okay, I butchered up in college. Okay, but even as Punky George, I was still respected, and I was still respected. The different things that I did when I came home to work, my sexuality, my gayness never came up. It was never an issue. At least that's my experience.
My experience have been a little bit different. In Boston, I was called a snake, and not the gay square or anything. In Boston, I was respected for being gay, but not respected as a Boricua. And in Puerto Rico, when I began this work and I was given the opportunity to open the first center, the people who threw stones at me was also part of the gay community themselves. The people who broke my glass window at the center in San Juan were gay people. And so it is interesting because you would expect for people that are different than you to throw stones at you. And although, yes, it does happen, you know, they do throw bad words at you and so forth. I personally have had to deal with the issue about being first Boricua, and then second about being gay, making or trying to make a difference in my own Puerto Rico and my own community throwing stones at me. But what I do is I grab those stones and I put them in my pocket, and it gives me the weight to continue moving forward. And so I always take that stone to give me more energies, and I eat them up. One of the experiences that I have had that has been so different than I expected was my first meetings with the resident commissioner of Puerto Rico, Jennifer Gonzalez. She is from a political party in Puerto Rico that are pro-statehood. And I would expect that that political party is normally known for being anti-LGBT long issues, you know, any issues. They have come a long way, certain individuals, and especially the red commissioner. I felt, and I was already going with my, you know, adrenaline, going, okay, I'm ready for the battle. But I was ready for the battle, and the battle just slapped me because there was no battle. To the point that she understood the need for this shelter and she's funding it. And because of my conversations, we have decided a ways ahead to do a campaign to teach individuals about our heroes. We call LGBT people who have made a difference in Puerto Rico and abroad in La Diaspora heroes and heroines of our community. And so we're teaching them that heroes, just like yourself, who may go through mainstream, not they understanding what you represent, and teaching them that you represent more than just what you have, you know, physically. And so we have developed, and you can visit our site, you know, grab one of the flags and go to our site and get educated about our heroes and heroines of our community, of our LGBT Boricua community. And so I'm taking this opportunity to tell that Lisbeth Melendez will be our hero and our heroine for the month of August. So she doesn't know it, but now she does. And she has made a difference not only in the US, but also in her own homeland of Puerto Rico. But it's important to educate ourselves that among us, we are making a difference.
Yeah.
We are making a difference.
Thank you. And George. Any more questions? Yes, Ms. Rucker.
In reference to getting a point across to the young people, how do they react to it? And I just want to tell everybody, Imani is my cousin, and not a distant cousin, but a first cousin, and I'm so, so proud of her. How do you get the young people to understand your lifestyle, or how do they react to you?
I would definitely say it's easier. It has been a lot easier. I think growing up, especially as a kid, I became sure of myself a little faster than I think my peers had a chance to. And I remember being like 9 years old and I'm telling a friend of mine for the first time, like, you know, maybe we should go movies. together one day, just you and me though, like just you and me. I'm being a little like, okay. And not really understanding why that was an issue then. And as I grew up as a teenager, I tended to have the issue where I would look at somebody who I really thought I loved as a friend, and I would turn around and be like, "Oh, hey, girl, I should probably be honest with you. This has become more than friend love for me." And when I was more in my school age, it wasn't a matter of people being mean to me as much as them not knowing what to say sometimes, just not really knowing, like, we don't have a language for this in the Virgin Islands, especially being raised in public school here. Was like, I remember finding out for the first time, I must have been 10 or 11, that like, two men could live together the way that like a man and a woman live together. Or, the fact that like two women could kiss in a way that a man and a woman would kiss. And that just absolutely blew my mind, because I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never heard anything like that. And I had never met anybody who was like that. I know I had cousins who, used to dress like boys, and they had a friend who used to live with them, but I never had really quite been told that queerness was something that even existed. So then to be the person running around Pearl V being like, girls and girls could kiss. Because I just found out, and I'm so excited, like, not the best idea at the time. But definitely as I got older and I became a teenager, growing up in the 2000s, where those things started to make it more to the media. Things like hearing about Pride and the Pride marches in the States were really something that was starting to come up. I remember, sitting on the couch watching the news June 26, 2015, when gay marriage was legalized, and texting my friends and being like, y'all seeing this? Like, do y'all understand the impact that's being made for us? Because at the end of the day, we weren't a part of the fight then, we were still just kids. We were watching all of y'all fight. We didn't know a lot about, the AIDS epidemic or the things that came before us. We knew that the world was finally making way. And I think as I got later through high school, it really was a normalized thing for most of my peers, but it was still an issue for my friends. And I say that to say, when I was a student at Good Hope Country Day, me being, Puerto Rican, me being Crucian, me being a female, which is the most important part, kept me protected. Because at the end of the day, you could try and say what you want to me, but if I got a comment auntie up here, if somebody in my family finds out that you talking to me crazy because of my identity, you're in trouble. That was not the case for my male Crucian gay friends who, always flamboyant but had to cool out when they got home. It wasn't a case when I was in theater and, we put makeup on a boy just for funsies because we're in the dressing room and, he wants to try it out. And then I find out the next day that, he kind of got beat down for his dad that night for coming home like that. For so many of us, I think in the younger community, we understand that we're in this weird middle piece where it is accepted and it's becoming normalized, but it's still a threat for so many people. And from my identity alone, I found more often than not that, I come from a certain place of privilege and protection that I have to use to make sure that my queer brothers and sisters also feel the same level of safety, also feel the same level of protection, because there's a big difference between me walking down the road, holding hands with my girlfriend, and Bobby doing the same with his boyfriend. It's drastic. And when it comes to young people, we are only a product of what we've been taught many times, but we're also a product of a world that is moving a lot quicker than it used to in terms of information and the things that we see online. And with that, young people, and especially young queer people, have a responsibility to make sure that we are not moving backwards, and that we are giving amplification and volume and space to the part of our generation that is willing to continue moving forward, rather than, I gonna call this man an auntie man because my father used to call this man an auntie man, or I am going to, feel weird about the fact that like a gay man touched my arm, or he talking to me tonight. to something when I walk away from this. You know, like a big part I think of being young and queer is the responsibility of reminding people that we're not done with this fight. There's a good chance we're not going to be done with this fight for a while, and you know, with that, there's a new spirit of queerness. There is a new life, especially here in the Virgin Islands when we talk about the queer community, that we're really responsible for. You know, because y'all have been doing it. Y'all went through the trenches, and we know, and we can't even know the full extent of it, but we understand that after all that you guys have been through and all that you guys had to deal with in order to make a space for us to even say that we have in a pride parade, you know, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're making the same space and the same progress for those who are coming up under us. Because I mean, we could tell you it's happening younger now. We're seeing queer people come out in their truth a lot sooner now, you know, and more publicly at that with the age of social media. So it's a lot of responsibility, but I definitely think it is a easier job than you guys had to deal with, and I think for that y'all deserve your own round of applause because you gave us this. Thank you.
Well, as Grandma Pride here, because we've been at this since 1994, right? With Diane and Nancy, Diane Butler, all our allies, you know, making space for queerness, right? With George, we started Planet Q, and then 13 Brave Souls went to New York and marched and represented St. Croix and the 25th anniversary of Stonewall. And we were there, 13 of us and 20 Puerto Ricans. And then by 10 blocks, there was 20 of us and 2,000 Puerto Ricans. But we were there, and we're still here now doing the work. And that's why I'm so happy for youth like you, Amani, and you, Bobby, and all the people here that are supporting the LGBTIQA community here and beyond, because we have to stand together. And it's time to pass the torch to the young people, for the young people to step forward, and for some of us to step back and advise. We got your back, but y'all need to step up and take some leadership now. It's time, you know? So I really appreciate you. Does anybody have any more questions before we go to the, sorry, Bobby.
I just wanted to say a couple of things about that. I think actually both your questions linked together with how young people react to the work that we're trying to do. Like just going back to, for instance, one of the Pride events that we had, the very first one, the first Pride event. It was again a little bit fearful because we didn't know how the community would react to having LGBT space within just a general mainstream club. And then even leading up to the event, there were people who were texting me saying, are there going to be is there going to be like media there? Is there going to be like cameras there? Because their greatest fear was being exposed. Having themselves unveiled, because we are constantly under each other's surveillance. Like St. Croix is so small, you can't go to Wendy's without someone saying, "I saw you in the line." So like you, like we are that I think that right there is a big response that we get, is especially from like you're talking, people who present as egregions, who present as the transgressions that people hate the most. But I think too that going back to Brittany's question, and just thinking about the previous panel and talk about self-love and how we have to just how hate comes from hating yourself at first. Like that hate towards other people comes from the hate that you have inside yourself, right? And I think that one of the reasons why we as a community have maybe been slow. What I would say is, sorry, let me start a new sentence. We are our own worst haters. We police ourselves, right? So we don't allow ourselves to be free. We don't allow ourselves to be true to ourselves on many occasions. And that's not everyone. There are some people who are very strong. There's some people who are within themselves, like some of my friends who are just flamboyantly themselves and perfectly themselves in every way. And those people have incredible courage, but that's not all of us. A lot of us we police ourselves. We keep on these straitjackets to keep us in line with expectations of our community. And I think that is the experience that a lot of people have. I think that I definitely know that like you were two different experiences with homophobia that you were talking about earlier, right? One where you're saying that you felt support from community. One where you said where you felt stones from within your own community, right? I think that, I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've been extremely blessed, my goodness, to have support from such extreme support from my family. Like I am so fortunate, but I also have friends who have not had the same support, and a lot of that hatred, a lot of those stones come from your friends, come from your family, come from within the community, and then also come from yourself. Because when thinking about the homophobia that I've experienced, I think the worst homophobia that I've experienced has been the homophobia that I've enacted towards myself, because it is myself who has not allowed me to be flamboyant, who has not allowed me to be to try different expressions of gender. And I know that that same internalized homophobia and that same fear is what polices people, and is what informs the responses that we get when reaching out. So that isn't to say that there's in progress, because to conclude with First Pride and with the events with Virgin Vogue and with Sandcastle, these events, they were this year. We saw the largest gathering of queer Virgin Islanders of color that I've ever seen at any event. And for the First Pride and with Virgin Vogue, those were monumental steps, I think, and where we're taking as a queer community. The fact that we have spaces and allies. I think what was really cool that Levon, you listed in the program, all in the history of queer community. You listed people who had business owners, and who identify as, or who are openly supportive of queer communities. And I think that's important, because when you have businesses that are queer friendly, that's where you get to congregate, and that's where you get to create that community. And so last night, for instance, like I was at Levels, and they were playing some house music. They're playing Beyonce's new track, "You Won't Break My Soul," and there was this guy from LA who was visiting. He started doing some Vogue dancing, and everyone was like, "Woo!" It was really cool. And the thing about it was, maybe a month ago, I would not have felt that feeling of exhilaration. I would have felt fear, right? I would have felt, what is going to happen to him? What is going to happen to us? Who is watching? But the fact that we are now progressing and creating these spaces and being open, and the fact that we are having the support, and I'm sure we're going to continue also to get pushback, it shows progress in our community. So I think that would be the response for the youth.
Thank you, Bobby. And I just want to commend you all for your courage and bravery and resilience and persistence and keeping our community together. We'll take one more question because we have to get to the next panel. Yes, Indira.
Actually, it's not a question. I wanted to talk about connecting the dots, and we still got our swag, so we're not in. But I just want to commend One Love and Super still got my move on, they got their move on, but about having conversation and walking away, that we're safe with each other and being able to give a good night. And so we still there. Good job, guys.
Yes.
I'm speaking to you not just as a commissioner, but as Bobby's mom.
I know that, but I wanted to hear you say it. This is Bobby's mom. Bobby Thompson's mom. Who just happens to be the commissioner of health, but she's Bobby's mom.
First of all, he knows I'm very proud of him, always been supportive of who he is as a person, as a gay person. And what I say, I want to go back to what you said in terms of love, and we've been speaking about that. But to actually to the families is who I want to speak to, because I think that they really,
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to speak to families because a lot of times you miss out, you lose out on who you are and who you have. And when Bobby he was at school at Amherst, he said, "Mommy, I have something to tell you." I said, "What is it?" He said, "I'm gay." And you know what I said to him? "And I love you anyway. It doesn't matter what you are, who you are. You're my son. I love you with all my heart." That was the conversation we had. I want to make sure that other parents don't have a blind eye on losing the preciousness of their children. And I think that so many of, like Bobby was talking about, some of his friends and their parents not accepting who they are as human beings, first of all, and really and truly pushing them away from them. And Bobby pulling them into our family so that they can have a place to go. And that's what he used to do at first when he was in high school. And it's like, oh my gosh, how many children are out there and not being loved because of who they decide to, or who they love because that's who they are. And I'm asking parents to really think back and really recreate in yourself. Don't lose time. Time is too precious. Life is too short. So take and embrace who you have around yourself and always be proud of who they are and who you are as a human being.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I want to thank you all. This has been beautiful. And we're going to take a 4-minute break. It's like hurting. We're going to take a 4-minute break. Okay, wait, Wolf is going to say something. We're going to take a 4-minute break because we have one more panel, and that is about the anti-bullying hate crime legislation. And then we're going to watch a documentary, Ahead of the Curve, by Jen Raden. Okay?
Very quickly, I think is important, someone mentioned it here, that you all support the type of events and the venues. Like, I haven't heard of Levels, but I'm going. We need to support our businesses, and we need to support the people who are doing this work here in St. Croix and in the USVI. Please, you don't have to like dancing, but just go and buy a water at Levels. But we need to support, including, please, on your way out, applaud the Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts for having this type of exhibit here of queer, whatever you want to title it, exhibit and art every single year as a consistent part of Pride here in the USVI. So please support, not because I'm a board member, but please support Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts.
Yes. Before you leave, please become a sponsor, a member, buy a calendar. Become a calendar sponsor, as a matter of fact. We're closing sponsorship for the 2023 calendar to get that printed. So become a calendar sponsor. Okay, go and come back. All right. 3 minutes now. Center for the Arts, CMC Arts Incorporated. This program is sponsored by Outright International and CMC Arts Incorporated. Our final panel today, and then after this, we're going to enjoy a wonderful documentary, Ahead of the Curve by Jen Raymond, upstairs in the exhibition space. And this panel is about anti-bullying, anti-hate crime in the U.S. Virgin Islands. To my right, I have the honor of having former Senator Diane Capehart. To her right is Scott Hensley, the Executive Director of Community First. And to his right is Indira Liebert, who is one of the co-founders of Liberty Place. I'm going to actually start the opposite way. I'm going to start with Indira. Could you please tell us the origin story of Liberty Place?
Good afternoon. I feel immensely joyous, and I have to start by saying the invitation to become a co-founder by Melvin Mathurin and Aubrey Lee was one of the greatest things that happened in my life as I had just arrived home in 2010. And having that opportunity became so many things that followed. Unfortunately, silence, violence, and the inactivity in our community to recognize blatant crimes that were happening, and it came about by the individual Jamal Richards, who was sodomized and killed. And we turned around, the community came together and figured out that how do we not be silent? How do we? And last I checked, I had a voice, and it became collaborative, and thus is spoken about Liberty Place. And I took a broom off of my wall that I bought in Brazil, and Melba and I held hands and said, we're going to jump this broom because now we're going to become a face of a vision, of a mission, and how it would impact us as individuals. And it started, it was rough, and our first space was at BI Care. And it was rough for me because I had come home in a wheelchair and I was not yet diagnosed, but I had skin abrasions and going in and out of the building at VI Care, hence the rumor Indira has AIDS. And so stigma, marginalization. I walked around with that, but feeling proud enough and knowing that the step that we took, we're going to face things like that. We're going to get questions like that. And with that being said, our organization was able to do collaborations with Department of Education, with counselors in junior high school and the high schools to identify red flags of bullying in schools, trying to start programs with the parents and the young lady, Bobby's mom, young lady, talking about the importance of language, but the importance of family and friends. And I will say this because my first bullying incident was in 6th grade, and it had nothing to do with who I identified with, because in 3rd grade I knew, because Little Switzerland was where I went to buy a gift for a teacher. Mom said, go pick out a gift, and I picked out diamond earrings. And I had to understand you can't give your teacher that gift, but I did bully because I liked that teacher. But the bullying came about with me having written an essay about doing something to help my sister breathe, something my mom taught me. If it doesn't work, the cipher doesn't work, use your mouth, you do that. And I did an essay, and all of my friends stopped speaking to me in junior high. So that was my first bullying or feeling marginalized. But growing up in St. Croix, I was a tomboy and really never had any experience of that type of work that I can see here and that I can see existing now since I've come home. And one of the things of connecting the dots, I think is very important with the continued collaborations with all of our organizations and stop avoiding the language and conversation when someone says, and growing up I knew two words that when it said, he's an alien or she's an alien, I was like, don't come from the sky. You know, so all of those things and words that we use and continue to use now starts that hate. It continues that hate. And these are things that we as individuals, I want to implore. When you're in conversation over dinner, in with colleagues or whatever, and you see someone using language or using defamation words to someone out of character, we need to be able to say something and be firm enough and confident enough to say something. Set the example for our younger individuals. And I am so very grateful for all the other organizations, especially the younger ones coming up.
Doesn't always come into play in a favorable light. We had some folks from the faith community that wanted to donate to our food program and prepare meals. And, you know, when asked about the prayer prior to the meal, you know, I asked that we recognize a moment of silence, you know, so that we recognize that people pray in different ways. And was told that if there was not a Christian prayer preceding the meal, then they were not going to participate in it. And, you know, I had a conversation with my partner at the last break, who identifies as Catholic, raised Catholic, you know, and that's his religion, but often feels that that is not a conversation he likes to have with the LGBT community, or, you know, I think we certainly all identify in different ways as rabble rousers. And, you know, I think that when we talk about safe spaces, one of our premises at Community First is creating that. You know, I think I've worked in the field with homeless youth for 25 years, and they are disproportionately represented in homeless shelters and drop-in centers. And so our charge, when we were thinking about opening up Community First, was the importance of not only providing individuals experiencing homelessness with shelter care outside of medical case management and behavioral health. We started a program at Frederiksted Healthcare years ago and recognized that good health outcomes were not going to emerge unless people had shelter. And the other part of that was also recognizing that most shelters are not LGBTQ affirming. You know, that I can't tell you how many stories over the years of individuals going into access services and were denied, like, you are not welcome here, you know. And for us, creating that safe space, we serve all populations that are marginalized and vulnerable at Community First, you know, but what we do is provide an opportunity for ongoing conversations with individuals that you might not normally cross paths with. You know, I think when we do intake and assessment at our shelter, you know, I explained to everybody in the very beginning that we all walk through the world in a different way. You know, that there are many different types of individuals that we serve there: LGBTQ, victims of sex trafficking, sex industry workers, people with mental health issues. There's a whole, and people that just had a real bad run of work, and can't afford the rent, that there is this diversity in our communities that really, when folks say we are stronger together, I mean, it matters and it means something and it's true, and for folks that we serve over at Community First, oftentimes they've been homeless for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and far removed from any sense of normalcy or whatever normalcy is, but that consistency of love, support, affirmation, and understanding. And, for us, creating spaces like that for all populations is beyond important. And that's what we do. And so right now we are into a year and a half of programming with Emergency Overnight Shelter and are starting to transition into the larger scope of tiny homes development for individuals that require permanent supportive housing. But lots of you are familiar faces, and most have been into Community First. But when you first walk in, we have sort of our wall of affirmation, and I try to create that environment. There are so many different individuals and different groups that you cannot fill, our walls with every population. But what we do is provide that safe space and inform folks that it's a conversation that we don't hide from and that's present in our day-to-day services. So.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Diane Gephardt.
Good afternoon, all. It is such a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to hear all the different panels addressing the issues that we face here locally and even nationally. For those who know me, I served in the 30th legislature, and my first bill was this bullying bill. And when Liberty Place approached me, I had already had the bill formed, working on it. It was held in committee. I just looked at the bill the day before yesterday, and I was like, damn, they held my damn bill in committee twice, but I still came. But Liberty Place came to me and they said, I want you to think about individuals, young students from 1st grade to 12th grade. You won't even believe kindergartners get bullied, 1st graders get bullied. So the legislation was amended. Well, it didn't get passed or anything yet. So I made sure that language was included. So I'm going to just give you a little synopsis of the bullying bill. It was bill number 30-0013. That is now Act number 7587. Okay, so thank you. So bullying prevention includes, but it is not limited to, instruction in the prevention and strategies for student-centered problem solving all of the following: intimidation, student victimization, sexual harassment, sexual violence, sexual discrimination due to sexual orientation and harassment. C, gang resistance, education and training means instruction in, without limitation, each of the following subject matters when accompanied by a stated objective of reducing gang activity and educating children in grades K through 12 about the consequences of gang involvement, conflict resolution, cultural sensitivity, personal goal setting, and resisting peer pressure. So I fought long and hard, fighting with the Department of Education at the time, Commissioner, why this bill was so important. I was told, we already have a policy, we don't need that bill. I'm like, listen,
What year was this?
this was 2014. And I'm like, listen, every time a commissioner comes on board, as Tita, you know, you have policies. Another commissioner could come on board, and that changes. So this is now AC in the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
Thank you. But no bill is perfect. As some of you know, I'm running again for the 35th legislature because I feel like I haven't finished what I started. And as I look at this bill, I already thinking I have amendments to this bill I am already going to put in. So there's like an app that you put in at your bill, and it tells you how you can even improve on, you know, definition, scope, projected groups, district policy requirements. So I'm ready. This is one of the things I'm going to be amending. But this is important to me because when individuals come to me and say, Capehart, you need to represent individuals who are not treated fairly. If you know me, I'm about fairness, parity. I don't look at individuals as who you are or what, you know, race you have, how you speak, where you come from. That doesn't matter to me. It matters to me how you are treated fairly as an individual. So I feel so proud every time I am asked to talk about this. Lavon, Indira, I just said to her, Indy used to be my best friend, you know, from kindergarten. So all the way till high school. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Lavon back in the day, probably when you first moved here. So I build friendships and I keep the friendships, and especially individual that would be working on your behalf. So I don't look at you any different. Any issues, please feel free to come to me because I know I'm going to be in the 35th legislature with your help, of course. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. So let me tell you something about Grandma Pride here. I was one of the first board members of Liberty Place in the early days, and shortly after Senator Capehart passed the anti-bullying legislation, Melba Matherin and I hosted anti-hate forum, and it was 2 days, one day in St. Thomas with the police department. All the police of the Virgin Islands were made to come to this meeting, and you know how they try to slip out, but they couldn't slip out. They had to sign in or they wasn't getting paid. We had police coming from BVI's, we had the AG's office. The AG was a little shady, and so that was the first one with law enforcement. The second one was here in St. Croix with first responders and the community and community clergy. And most of the clergy that were there were love affirming, but there were two haters. One had to leave and the other one tried it, but we had made him chill out. At the first one, it was crazy. This is an anti-bullying, right? People are trying to bully you at an anti-bullying conference, okay? So at the first one in St. Thomas, it got wild. One of the officers at the forum almost completely confessed to harassing a transgender person. Yes. Everybody just kept sending him the signal to shut up, stop now. People were pulling his coattails. It was crazy. And then about the hater here on St. Croix, they got a little frothing at the mouth. But our local clergy at the time, Reverend Koopman, who has passed, Reverend Rockman, who's not here today, stood up against him. And then we had to quote some real scripture to him and explain with the truth, and like not to take a snippet, a blessing out of context and turn it into a curse. So he settled down and became more cordial after that. But we need to have more forums like this and more forums to educate our community that we are a community, and regardless of how we look, how we walk, how we talk, who we love, that we are all here to love and respect and build St. Croix and the U.S. Virgin Islands, right? So thank you. Thank you.
So thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this anti-hate forum. When I get elected, we'll see how we can appropriate monies for a bigger conference. So we can educate the public. Education is the key. When people understand and they know, they address situations differently. But when they don't know, they're in the dark, then that's where the ignorance is played. So just know that, as I said, Diane Capehart would continue to be an advocate for you. So proud of you, the young individuals who have stepped up and say, I am going to just be brave. I'm going to do understand and be more compassionate, because it really, really takes a toll on individuals when they are not accepted. So I think education is the key. Just know that I'll be your advocate. Thank you for the opportunity. It's an honor. Thank you.
I'm honored. Thank you. As my good friend Jalene Dunn says, be you, know you, love you, because nobody else can be you. Nobody else can do you better than you can. Any questions?
I don't have a question. I just want to say to the nonprofit organization, it is now grant writing time for Virgin Islands Council of the Arts. We do give up grant money up to 10 to 15,000 went up. The workshop is going to take place at George Cultural Center on the 2nd of July. So if anybody needs some money to support the Caribbean Center here, so if you need some money, come to find out how to write a grant to get some money.
Thank you, Ms. Roper.
Yes. Did everybody hear that? FICA is holding a meet and greet on July 2nd at 12 o'clock at Dorsch Center to teach people how to write grants to get money for their organizations and their projects. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Comments?
I always ask things. What does visibility mean for you in your roles?
What does visibility mean for you in your roles?
First, help. First, I need you to define what you mean by role.
Like the position you play in the different organizations you've helped to establish. Like what does visibility mean to you?
It means carrying out the mission statement fully and honestly.
Oh, visibility. Think about this. I think for me, it's important to share my truth, with the residents that we serve, individuals that are accessing our program. A lot of times when I open up that intake and assessment and sort of go through that list of populations that we serve, 90-something% of the time I identify, as a gay male in that. And, typically the reaction is fairly benign, but there's also some times where there's kind of shock and awe at the same time. And I think for many people that claim that they don't have anybody or have known anybody that's LGBTQ in their life, well, certainly that's not true, right? And I think a lot of times what changes that paradigm, that worldview of an individual is knowing somebody that identifies as that population. This person is human. This person has a heart. I love them. I care for them. That's one of many ways that we change the conversation and make it real.
Well, for this question, for me, it's just more being an advocate for you, being an ally for you. Because it's important that you can have someone in the legislature that can understand and have compassion. You see that? Compassion.
Explain to all your other
colleagues. Oh, don't get me started, because I've been trying to preach while I'm on the campaign trail to when you going out to vote, look at individuals, see how they work in the community, see what roles they've had in their jobs, just see how their attitudes and their temperaments are, because we need to be able to advocate for all Virgin Islanders. And if a special group, if it's an Islamic group, if it's a Muslim group, it's the LG, how you say, LGBTQ. I always get mixed up. Trust me, I have to look and see. We need to be able to build consensus together to advocate for you. So just know that I am your ally, I'm your advocate. That's the role that I have in the legislature for you. So as I say, go out to vote, you look at individuals who can work together as a team on your behalf.
Is it LGBTQ?
May I?
But I didn't get to speak yet. I've been of service to St. Croix and U.S. Virgin Islands since I first came here. I came here in service to help rebuild after Hurricane Hugo, and in service in nonprofits like we created BI Care. We helped build Liberty Place. I'm very supportive of Community First. I serve on ECADE, Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality, on their board for my sixth year now, for human and civil rights for all people of the Caribbean and the Global South. in some Caribbean countries, being LGBTI is illegal. They are illegal in their countries. Their existence is illegal. And I fight to tear down anti-buggery laws in their constitution. So far, we've had six successes, one in Asia, two in Africa, and the others here in the Caribbean. So earlier, feel the fear and do it anyway. When Amani was talking earlier about the first Pride Parade, we have been celebrating Pride here for many years. The first big Pride celebration was in 2012 in the cul-de-sac of the homes of Rob Banter, Tim Buck, Russell Potet, and Bob Cometier. And we would have our wonderful gathering with our allies and our LGBTIQ folks, and that was fine. When the youth said, "Why don't we have a parade?" We're like, "Okay, let's have a parade." Because of some foolishness, some fragile egos and personalities trying to boost their ratings on their radio talk show. Yeah, I'm going to tell it. I'm going to tell the truth and share the devil. There were some personalities that that used to have, before they started with us, okay, used to have a radio show. It was a Melee show that came on 5 days a week and used Miss Evans to start some crap and lied and created all of this drama. Then it became people calling in, "Oh, we're using the youth," and calling us all kinds of names, you know the names. And so we had to step forward and get on the radio. I called that show and laid that host out while I was in my office at the Women's Coalition of St. Croix. I was livid. He knows who I am. He knew who was talking to me with this voice. And he knew who was talking to him. And he said nothing afterwards. And then thanked me for calling. He wasn't coming for me, right? Because I was telling the truth, right? Because first of all, what grown consenting adults so I told him, first of all, it's none of your business. That's first. What grown consenting adults do is none of your business. That's first. And second of all, I'm not having it. I went on and on. He said thank you and let me go. But then this became infamous Pride and Prejudice. There was some hate speech on social media I called Michael Lavar from the Washington Blade and told him what was going on. And then he started monitoring what was happening here. Then I sent him pictures of the police being attacked by a former senator and a gang, a mob of fools that didn't really know what. I honestly think they were paid to go out there and dump their broken furniture in the road in front of the fish market. But they did not touch us. The police commissioner and the police, the Virgin Islands Police Department, protected us and made them pick up their crap from the middle of the road, and we all passed safely. But there was so much fear that I was very concerned that the parade was going to even happen, because people were calling me and emailing me telling me that they were afraid. So when people started lining up and showing up, it was a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
There was a lot of love that day. And love always conquers fear and hate. So I want to thank you all for being, yes, Bobby.
Is there one quick question? Like, what were the specific arguments or the points that you presented to the previous commissioner of the Department of Education to convince them that the LGBT bill is necessary? I'm just thinking about like the fact that we're thinking of going into schools and having conversations and talks and education for the children, but of course we would need to have the approval of the actual the executive people. So what were the arguments that worked? What were the points that resonated most with that commissioner?
That there was policy already existing and the legislation, the whole bill was not necessary. It wasn't even just sections was okay. They didn't even think it was necessary to have that training for their teachers and administrators.
And what did you say to convince them that that was necessary?
That children are being affected by bullying. I mean, when you have actually a grandmother came to my office with her grandson, he had a little backpack on his back, and it was a knife stab in his backpack. And she said, if my grandson didn't have this backpack on, he would have been stabbed in his back. And these things were just overlooked by these teachers and the administrators. Probably at that time they didn't think it was important. But bullying, you know, you could say, well, oh, that child is just a problem child. But that person may not be a problem child. They may just be bullied every day and they're acting out. So, you know, that's why I thought it was very important for the teachers and administrators to be trained to appropriate funds for this to happen. So that's why I'm happy that, you know, I fought long and hard after being held 2 times in committee and then sent to the Rules Committee and then forwarded to the full body for full consideration, and it was passed. But as I said, this is not even a perfect bill as I look at it now, and I think that there needs to be amendments as times pass and more clarification in the bill needs to be had. So just know that I would do that. Yes.
There's so many laws being passed in the states, and I'll just be very generic about the don't say gay laws and all this kind of business, the Florida, the Texases, the this, that, and the other. We are so uneducated in the Caribbean, so to speak, in terms of civil rights and gay rights issues. What is the Virgin Islands legislature going to do to assure that we here in the Virgin Islands are protected against the bigots? Because honestly, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, who's there for us. I mean, you, yes.
Yes.
But who else? Because we need kind of like an army of people. We are considered an Article 4 creation of Congress in terms of the court system is quite unique
Mhm.
than any other jurisdiction. So we've got a little bit of leeway, and we also have not a lot of leeway. I mean, it could go either way. But what kind of protections are we going to get to protect us against the bigots that are close by and are trying to infiltrate everything?
Diana, I think that's a good question. And as you say that, the first thing that came to my mind is a partnership with the executive branch, the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and even our congressional representative. And these sometimes, all of us, we're separate entered branches, but we all have to get together when we start seeing certain things happening on the mainland that we need to secure and make sure that there are rights for our Virgin Islanders, that they are not impacted negatively. So I think a collaboration with all branches of government and our congressional representative as I go forward, I think a conversation needs to be had with all of these different branches. I think that's the first step. Yes.
I think what you're saying is so true, but also you need to be counted. You need to go and meet with the commissioner, you need to meet with everybody and say, you vote here.
So you say like a registry of how many, your population, say you have 1,500 on St. Croix, 1,500 on St.
There is a study that shows that in the islands it's between 7 to 11% of every county or every municipality within the island are LGBT people.
Right.
So you can always take that, although the government doesn't count us, we need to count ourselves. And you can use the census 2020 as the basis because the 2020 census captured same-sex couples. And you can say that not every same-sex couple gets married. So there you go back to the research, scientific base research that shows from 7 to 11% are LGBT people. That data is so powerful, you need to throw it at their faces.
Right.
And you need to go there and be who you are and be counted and take the time to meet them.
I would say that would be the fuel for the fire. Right. Yeah, because data, that really is your power right there. Thank you.
I just also want you to, especially the young folks here, I also want you to be aware that a lot of the people that are running for Senate or governor don't care about us.
Yeah.
They will come and court us when they want to get elected, they don't know you after that, right? So there are people like Diane Capehart that are different. She's always had our back and tells the truth. And that's what she says she's going to do. But just be careful because this, it's election season. You see the signs everywhere and they're going to start coming around. They're going to come sniffing around. But that's when you ask them directly what you're going to do and what you stand for.
And what have you done?
And what have you done? What have you done? Because they'll show up at events now because even though none of them came today, but they'll start showing up and trying to court you for your vote. So just be careful. Anything else?
I just want to say, when I came back home, growing up with Diane, I'm speaking of individuals that, as Yvonne just said, that you think would have the sense to be a compassionate person as being an elected official. I will remain nameless. We were having a function right here in Frederiksted, and they were walking with two young ladies who needed to use the bathroom. And I was standing at the door, and the individual asked me, can they use the bathroom? And I said, of course. It's a party that we had. It was a LGBT event. And I said, sir, you're more than welcome to come in. It would be nice to, why would I want to go in a place like that? But you would still ask for bathroom to be used to the individual you're walking with. But would turn your back with that opportunity to walk in and show solidarity with a community that, guess what? That's over 100 votes in there. That's exactly what I
Well,
said
at
to
least
them.
he wasn't a hypocrite. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to the Executive Director of Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts, CMC Arts, Lisa Mordhorst.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to thank everybody for participating, all the panelists, Levon for organizing this. What I'd really like everybody to know that CMC Arts is very, very proud to host an event like this. We stand for freedom. Hate is really intrinsically tied to freedom, and hate does not allow many of us to feel free often. So these conversations help change that. It might seem small, but every step is huge along the way. And CMC Arts is here supporting freedom, creative freedom, all freedom. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lisa. So, does anybody have any questions or comments as we before we go upstairs to watch the documentary Ahead of the Curve by Jen Raymond? Anything else? I want to thank Reverend Elizabeth Melendez Rivera, Dr. Reverend George Flores Jr., Imani Evans, Dr. Wilfred Labiosa, Robert Thompson, Dr. Janzira Davis Kahina, Dr. Unfortunately, Bob Pamotier wasn't feeling well and couldn't come today, Scott Hensley, Reverend Julie Johnson Staples, and Indira Lieber, and all of you for being here. Please support the Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts. We always have wonderful things going on for everyone, from tots to seniors, and everybody in between, especially us. Thank you. So if you could just grab your chair and take it upstairs, and we'll start the film shortly. Thank you.
Welcome our panel of Howard Dykes, Francis Stevens, publisher and editor-in-chief of Deneuve, the hottest lesbian magazine.
Deneuve, the leading lesbian magazine. There wasn't a glossy magazine for lesbians anywhere.
She decided, I'm going to make one. That's total rock and roll.
I love my job. I love my job. I love my job.
There hadn't been a lesbian lifestyle magazine before.
Deneuve gave the community the gift of connection in a time when it wasn't okay to be a lesbian.
We were excited because it was like all the other magazines, which in 1990, that did not happen.
This magazine was really going to change things.
I know lesbians, including myself, who collected every issue.
One of the principles of social change for lesbians has been visibility.
Lesbian visibility is absolutely essential if we want anyone coming of age now to think that there's a culture worth joining.
I definitely would go to the bookstore and read Curve magazine.
Whoever was in Curve, like that was it. That's how you knew what was going on.
Like the latest musicians,
like,
the latest artists.
Yeah.
Franco just explodes on the scene with pride and with elegance and honesty.
Just to bring a magazine to the newsstands so that lesbians could see a little bit of themselves reflected on pages required a lot of courage and tremendous grit and no doubt significant sacrifice.
Can I take a tea?
Oh, thank you. Up, up. Ooh, paws are wet. Oh, right on the cut.
What's going on?
I got this email from Silke. She wants to talk. Doesn't sound good.
You all right? Can I have a kiss? Can I have a better one?
Thank you. Of course.
It's really cool seeing how this like
dichotomy of really young, like those people in the lobby, was that a mother and her child, or was that just an older woman, like, and a teenager?
No. I don't know, but I like that you use the word dichotomy.
Ah.
I can't see you. Oh, now I can see you. Now you're jumping all over the place. That was a little alarming.
The first email.
Well, the one that said, I don't know if we'll be in business in a year, I guess that one.
I don't have an answer. I think this is why I'm reaching out.
What do you need me to do? What can I do to be helpful?
To keep the brand alive.
Mm-hmm.
Even now that you've sold it to me, it symbolizes a lot for the women who bought Deneuve and Curve almost 30 years ago.
You know, something has to shift in order for Curve to keep going in whatever format that is.
Yeah.
I think she's lost. Yeah, and you know, who am I to point fingers for things that I believe are not the right decision that she's made along the way?
Are you kidding me? Who are you?
I lost the right to criticize. Are you biting your lip?
A little bit.
Yeah, I don't, you know, it's like in the last 24 hours, you know, I heard this thing that I never wanted to hear, that the magazine could be coming to an end. Should it come to an end? Or should it change into something else?
Right.
So what does it become? I don't know. I really don't.
So then I guess the big question is, do you want to be part of figuring out what it is?
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a show that's all about Power Dykes. They are here and they are queer. Frances Stevens, at 26 years old, how long have you been a self-described lesbian?
A self-described lesbian. I was actually married for 3.5 years.
Oh, I didn't know.
And may the Great Spirit watch over you. Amen.
It was a really expensive, elaborate, beautiful, amazing day. I was living the fairy tale. You know, here was this great guy. Everything was great with my family. And I had no idea that I was gay. I didn't know any out gay people when I was growing up. There was one character on a TV show that was a gay guy. I went to school at San Francisco State University. There was one prerequisite called Variations in Human Sexuality. It's like as if somebody hit me over the head with a baseball bat. Like they explained what being a lesbian was. I just knew all of a sudden that that was me. It was like somebody just said, wake up. Wait a second. The fairy tale has just been blown up. What do I do?
I think we should do away with gays if possible.
You can't hold hands in public. You can't be affectionate in public. It's a hard road. We have got nothing behind us legally.
I was shell-shocked to work the phone lines at the National Center for Lesbian Rights and to take call after call from lesbians and also gay men who had been kicked out of their families, lost custody of their kids, been fired from their jobs, been stripped of a sense of hope and future. I could not believe how devoid of just the most basic sense of belonging and dignity existed for LGBT people in this country. You had Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Gays could reveal their status only at their own risk.
being homosexual is still grounds for dismissal.
We need to protect our social and moral foundations.
You had Bill Clinton signing the Defense of Marriage Act.
States are not obliged to recognize the legal gay marriage of another state.
You did not have openly gay, queer elected officials. You did not have celebrities who were out and proud. We did not see ourselves represented in any positive mainstream way.
I love you. Come on. Cindy, what's wrong with you? What do you mean? All this touching and hugging girls and I love you. Boy, are you strange. Well, I didn't mean anything. I'll just bet. You better think about what you mean.
Frank, what if this magazine goes out of business in the next year?
It's very likely that it could.
And
will people care? I don't know what other people think. You know, the magazine was a way, it was a vehicle for lesbians to disperse information to other lesbians. Now, anyone can do a blog. Anyone can, you know, have their own YouTube channel. You know, it's much more immediate. It gives way more access to the people. I think the year I started the magazine, there were like over 700 magazines founded that year. I remember hearing a statistic that there were like 6 or 7 of those left. 30 years, that's a long time, you know?
Guess we'll see what people think tomorrow.
Is anybody going to come to our panel? Maybe no one will come.
Hey, Andrea, nice to meet you. Yeah, nice to meet you too.
We thought we would start just with a quick introduction. Franco Stevens, who's the woman who started the Curve magazine, which is the longest running best-selling lesbian magazine in the world.
When I started the magazine, it was like a big controversy. Do I put the word lesbian on the cover? And women were like, you can't do that. No bookstores will carry it. I can't be seen buying this thing. I mean, I can't even verbalize today how much I was ridiculed and bashed, even from within our own community, by putting the word lesbian on the cover. And, you know, I just want to know by a show of hands, like, how many of you are still embracing of that or okay if people identify as lesbian? Can you raise your hand? That's way more than I thought. How many of you think it's outdated and doesn't represent our community? A couple people. Thank you for being honest.
Coming from like a Latin community, the word lesbian, I feel like it's still important. It's made a difference. It's made an impact. Why do we want to erase it from our history?
I personally would never use it to describe myself because I feel like it's been co-opted by straight men as this like overly sexualized term.
We've heard of multiple women of a certain age who are feeling like they're becoming invisible, like they're being cast aside.
I use either lesbian or queer interchangeably. And, you know, a lot of folks in Gen Z are actually more likely to identify as queer or pan or bi. And there's something wrong with that. But again, it's this idea of it is the word exclusionary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some lesbian spaces can be super inclusive, but there is also a history of, you know, lesbians not being so inclusive.
Yeah.
I identify as a trans woman, and I'm not super comfortable with the word lesbian, but I do feel safe using queer because I feel like it is a broader term. It is sort of I know that queer spaces are safe spaces.
I can totally understand that. You know, a lot of old school lesbians are trans exclusionary radical feminists. We call them TERFs.
I think lesbian is an important word because it describes exactly who you are. But inside the group, there's a really hot and heavy discussion about it.
The only word that anybody seems to globally have an issue with is the one word that women can own for themselves that is
Exactly.
about women. You know, I totally understand that the word lesbian can feel exclusionary to, you know, a woman who loves women who doesn't identify as a lesbian, but that's the one word that we have that is only ours and nobody else's.
So I actually just came out to my abuela in December, and I was like, abuela, soy lesbiana. And she's just like, ¿en serio? And that was like it. Like, she's just like, really? I was like, oh, you know, like I knew that there was like no guy ever good enough for you, but like now it all makes sense. And I was like so shocked. And like the worst comment she said was like, but vaginas are so much work. And I was just like, and I was like, I somehow ended up here in this conversation. By being visibly queer and being visibly Latinx, like I can hopefully make it easier for younger folks in my family and other folks in my community, regardless of whatever word you choose or what label you want to attribute to yourself. Like literally being visible is the most important thing for me.
You know, it's funny, I didn't pick up a Curve magazine until I was in college. And I literally picked it up when I was in a journalism class my freshman year. I was like, what is this? And I just got so excited because as it is, I was just so excited to see a magazine about women that wasn't sexualized.
You know, going and hearing all these women say, you know, I'm too scared to use the word lesbian, or I don't use the word lesbian because, you know, I don't feel safe doing it, makes me think that, God, there's so much more work to be done.
The reason why lesbian gets so much heat, I think, is many things. I think it's because it is seen as being political. Women are owning their identity, like that one person said, it's the one label that's ours. But I do think also it's because of that loud minority that has that reputation of being exclusionary.
I made the magazine to say, however you choose to present yourself, you're still a part of this community. But a magazine has a limited distribution. Like there's other ways for lesbians to connect besides a print magazine.
We can never be too visible, right? And that's because they've wanted us to be invisible for so long that any type of visibility is radical. It's political.
Hilton Head, South Carolina. Step this way, please.
You know what? Look at you. There you have a present down.
We drove to Beach Week. We rented a house.
Jamie.
Blaine came storming into the living room. He was screaming, "My wife is a dyke." Like it stung his tongue to even say it.
When my husband outed me to my family, it felt like it was my story to tell. That was my decision to tell my family when I was ready. He had just kind of blown up my world, which meant that I never had to do it, but it was kind of something that was taken away from me.
I don't think Frank lied intentionally. I think she needed to come to terms with it herself, but not telling my parents when she did figure it out, that was hard.
If you felt this way, you should not have gotten married.
I think it was like a shocking thing. Like, this is something that they did wrong. You know, nobody wanted to have the gay kid.
I grabbed my car keys and I walked out, and that was it. That was the end. I just took what was on my back and left. So I didn't have anywhere to go. And I lived in my car. And it was humiliating for me. And I didn't want anyone to know. It was bad. After about a month, I called the house and my mom picked up and I said, I know that this isn't what you want for me. Can you please lend me $500 so I can get a place to live?
I said, you made your bed. I'm sorry. I've spent all the money on you I can do. Do what you have to do to make your own way. But I cannot support you.
I felt like I was completely alone.
The victim of what many people say was a hate crime in Wyoming this morning has died.
Shepard, a gay man, was allegedly beaten, left to die.
It was very hard to be out and open in the late 80s. There was a history of gay bashing.
It was nothing to walk down the street and have somebody smack you or hit you. Once I had a guy spit in my face.
We are ostracized by society. They call you dyke, they spit on you, they think that you're fat and they think that you're ugly. And that's because that's the image that's been projected about us.
These two women hiking the Appalachian Trail, a man identified them as a lesbian couple. He ended up murdering one of the women while they slept in their tent. It's a stone's throw in terms of history away from where we sit right now.
I still really want Curve in whatever form to continue, if it's still needed. I think what I need to do is find some young activists, find young people who are like what I was like, at 25 and 30. Who are they? What are their goals? What are they bringing to the community? What do they need? What does the community need? And then maybe if we talk to some of them, we can get an idea of what the mission of the magazine or the mission of this project should be. This is a poem called Dear Straight People by Denise Frohman. Apparently it won the World Poetry Slam.
Dear straight people, who do you think you are? You have to make it so obvious that I make you uncomfortable. Why do I make you uncomfortable? Do you know that makes me uncomfortable? Now we both uncomfortable. Dear straight people, sexuality and gender, two different things, combined in many different ways. If you mismatch your socks, you understand. Dear straight people, kissing my girlfriend in public without looking to see who's around is a luxury I do not fully have yet. But tonight, I am drunk in my freedom. Grab her hand on the busiest street corner in Philadelphia, zip my fingers into hers and press our lips firmly until we melt their stares into a standing ovation. Imagine that we are in a sea of smiling faces, even when we're not. And when we're not, we start shoveling, digging deep into each other's eyes. We say, hey, baby, can nothing stop this tonight? Because tonight, this world is broken, and we're the only thing that's going to keep it together.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, huh?
Just the significance of the magazine for so many years has meant a lot to a lot of queer folks, a lot of LGBT folks. It meant a lot to me. It was the first magazine that I saw as a young kid walking around New York City, and I was like, what's that? And seeing women on the cover, and I'm like, became a lot more curious about sort of just the community. It was a way for us to connect to each other. And so it's important for young people to know that this magazine is part of their lineage too.
The first time that I saw you, I just remember feeling that like total feel of power, like, wow, this person is speaking to me. And then I imagined, would it be like if I was 20 and I was hearing you like, go get it. I was just so blown away that I was like, this is where I hope our community is going.
Young people were sort of messaging me from all over the world saying, I found this poem and I came out to my mom, or I came out to myself. One of the reasons I'm drawn to work with young people is because I believe in their wisdom. Poetry is a way to fall in love with the power of your voice.
Why do my parents despise me so much? Why couldn't I be the daughter they wanted? Why can't you be like your cousin? Why can't you be like most normal girls? I'm sorry I like girls. They saw it as a sickness that was able to be cured. The guilt is unbearable.
My mom broke down so bad, like someone died. Everything that a homophobe would say just came out of my mom's mouth at that moment. We were fighting, and then she was like, if I knew you were gay, I would have aborted you. And I didn't even know what to say because it was so much.
There are students on this campus who may not even know that they're queer or questioning yet, but maybe